It's Devil's Night, the night before Halloween, also called Hell Night, known as a big party night for teens. On October 30th, 1998, that's exactly what happened in Midland, Ontario, Canada. Jake Just and his friend Steve Hayes were enjoying some beers at Jake's house and watching TV when they decided to go to a house party at 10 p.m. It is reported that Jake and his friends were drunk and smashing beer bottles on their heads in a display of foolish teenage behavior. As Jake and his friend Steve Hayes departed from the party around midnight, they staggered through backyards in an attempt to find the street. It was then that Jake suggested taking a shortcut through the woods. Steve didn't want to take the dark, swampy shortcut, so they decided to meet up at the street where the shortcut connected. However, Jake was not at the shortcut's exit when Steve arrived, and he has not been seen since. It may seem cliché, but in this instance, Jake Just truly disappeared without a trace almost 26 years ago, and not a single piece of evidence, and I mean not a single piece of evidence, has ever been found. Midland, Ontario, with a population of 16,500, is a town in Simcoe County known for its charm and coziness. It is nestled on the shores of the Georgian Bay, and it offers boating, fishing, and picturesque views of the 30,000 islands. Jake Nicholas Just was born on December 15, 1979, in Midland, Ontario, Canada. He had two sisters and was close to his mother, Debbie. Jake loved music, skateboarding, snowboarding, he had a job, a girlfriend, and a loving family. He was known as a big kid with a wide circle of friends. His friend Steve mentioned that those who spent time with him respected him, but those who didn't know him often wanted to fight with him due to his size. He held a blue belt in karate and had been passionate about martial arts from his childhood. Jake's mother reported that he had used his martial arts training to defend himself against people on 2 separate occasions. Quote, "One guy ripped out chunks of Jake's hair, smashed Jake's nose. People said Jake tried to block him, and he finally just had to beat him up." And his mother is confident that her son, who was 6 feet 2 inches tall and weighed 170 pounds, could defend himself if he was confronted. In a court TV documentary, Debbie, Jake's mother, spoke about their close relationship. They had experienced a difficult period when he was 16 and being rebellious, but they had managed to resolve their issues. And for anyone who might try to read something into this, let me tell you, I have teenagers and sometimes they act out and you argue. It's normal. Debbie said Jake was a big kid at heart, but he had a special maturity and insight. His future was looking promising as he was getting ready to go to college when he disappeared. Despite his maturity, Jake was just your typical 18-year-old kid who loved to spend time with his buddies. And that is exactly what he was doing on October 30th, 1998. Like I said, on the evening he disappeared, Jake was at home watching TV and enjoying beers with his friend Steve Hayes. Around 10, they decided to head to a house party in the town's north end. Steve confirmed in the court TV documentary that Jake and some of his group were smashing beer bottles over their heads at the party. And the story from here kind of gets murky, and there are a few different supposed scenarios as to what happened next. Now, Steve Hayes told his version of events in the court TV documentary, and in this documentary, police confirmed that this was the actual official version of what happened that night. And there are other versions, probably rumors, but there is just so much mystery surrounding this case that I think it's important that all of the versions be told because the truth probably really lies somewhere in the middle, maybe. So around midnight, which would be October 31st, Halloween, Jake and Steve left the party. Steve recounted that they were intoxicated and stumbling as they attempted to navigate their way to the road through the pitch-black backyards. Along their way to the street from the backyards, they passed a shadowy path through the Sunnyside woods. Jake took the shortcut through the woods while Steve stayed on the lit street path. They agreed to meet up where the trail exited onto Vinden Street. But when Steve got to the spot where Jake should have emerged from the woods, he couldn't find him. Steve said he didn't wait too long because he just thought that Jake took off somewhere else. Jake has not been seen since, and his friend Steve was the last person to see him, at least that we know of. Now, there are a few other versions of events of what may have happened that night. One being that Jake was kicked out of the party for suggesting attendees smash beer bottles over their heads. Then he and his friends went to a nearby house for help because Jake was bleeding. Apparently he was bleeding pretty bad and he was in the bathroom asking for towels to soak up the blood. When the homeowners came back, though, Jake jumped out the window. Another version says that Jake fled into the woods after being chased by a local resident after the party ended. And then in 2019, a high school friend of Jake's contacted Simcoe.com with a tip about the case. He said that he had called Crime Stoppers and spoke with an OPP detective, but investigators didn't follow up with him. He said he got this tip from a, quote, trusted lifelong friend. So allegedly, Jake had managed to walk through the forest and then went to a party on 4th Street, where a group of local drug dealers confronted him and dragged him out of the house. They beat him to death and buried him under an isolated pier on the Georgian Bay. He revealed that Jake knew the suspects and that they still lived in the Midland area, and he claimed that Jake sold marijuana in high school. Investigators have said that they are aware of the suspects named, but that they never came up in connection with the case. And Debbie said that she doesn't believe this version of events since it doesn't sound like her son. Yet another version of events was presented by a Reddit user on the Let's Not Meet subreddit. Yes, I know, the internet, we have to take it with a huge grain of salt, but like I said, there is so much mystery surrounding Jake's disappearance, I did feel it was important to include all versions of what may have happened to him. Anyway, allegedly this user claimed that he was a cab driver in Midland, and in 2011 he picked up a 40-ish-year-old man. During their conversation, the man brought up an incident in which he and his friends beat up a, quote, stupid kid at a party. The fucker was breaking beer bottles over his head and was all kinds of shades of fucked up. Really pissed me and my friends off, so we followed him from the party to this house in Sunnyside. We grabbed him from the bathroom. The kid had no chance. We dragged him into the marsh and beat the shit out of him. Before we knew it, kid wasn't breathing. It is unknown if this user reported this encounter to the OPP. It's actually really unknown if this even is about Jake or even if this story is true. But if it is true, the story kind of lines up with one of the other versions where Jake was in the bathroom. Even though it said that he jumped out of the bathroom, it does kind of line up that they said they dragged him out of a bathroom. And this case probably has the most rumors I have ever seen. And I really wasn't sure what to include, but I did decide to go with the official version since rumors, they have to be taken, like I said, with a huge grain of salt. And also, I have seen how and read how Jake's friend Steve came under intense scrutiny. I mean, he was the last person seen with Jake, so logic would say that he may be connected, especially since police have not been able to even prove that Jake did go into the woods like Steve claimed. However, for reasons that I do not understand, police did say in this documentary on Court TV that they do consider Steve's account of events as the official version. Again, though, I did want to mention some of the other versions of what happened that night because, honestly, something just doesn't add up. So, Jake did break a beer bottle over his head that night, and he was bleeding. But according to Steve, it was only a scratch from a piece of glass that had been inside of Jake's hat. He said that breaking beer bottles over their heads was something they all did. It was stupid and immature, but it's just something that they would do. He says that Jake did not have a concussion, and that the beer breaking had happened 3 hours before he disappeared. He said that people had exaggerated that Jake was gushing blood, but really it was just a little scratch, and he doesn't think that the beer breaking over his head had anything to do with Jake's disappearance. Steve also explained to Court TV how Jake ended up in the woods. So he said that from the backyard, Jake just started heading to the bush to find the shortcut. Steve asked where he was going, and Jake said, we'll take this and get out on Vinden Street. Steve said he wasn't going in there because they had such a hard time getting through the backyards where they had a light to guide them, but there was no light in the woods and it was swampy, dark, and they were drunk. He didn't think anything of it when Jake wasn't at the meeting spot. He just thought that Jake took off somewhere else. And he said that even when he called the next day and Jake wasn't home, he just thought, again, that Jake had gone to another party or something. He does regret, though, not making Jake come with him, or that maybe he should have gone with Jake. So the events at the party, to me, remain unclear at best. However, it is believed that Jake did end up walking through the woods, so logically it would seem that whatever happened to Jake occurred in those woods, or possibly after he emerged on the other side while waiting for Steve. But here's the thing. There is no evidence that Jake even went into those woods. So what the heck? So the next morning, the morning of Halloween, Debbie woke up and found that Jake was not in his room, and he didn't call, which was unusual for him. So she went on about her day, and throughout that day, many of Jake's friends phoned for him. She asked if they had seen him, but none had seen him since the previous night. She gave out candy to the trick-or-treaters that evening, but by 8:30 p.m., she knew something was really wrong and contacted the police. The following day, on November the 1st, an extensive search started for Jake in the wooded area where he was believed to have gone. Authorities report that they utilized every available resource over the course of an 8-day search, including civilian aircraft, the Ontario Provincial Police's helicopter, thermal imaging, a K-9 unit, professional searchers, and local search and rescue squads. Despite all of these efforts, no physical evidence pertaining to Jake was discovered in the area. Hundreds of volunteers, friends, and neighbors searched the area where Jake went missing, west of Sunnyside Drive and north of Vinden Street in Midland, including the marshes and forests. But like I said, not one sign of Jake was ever found. Nothing. Staff Sergeant Jim Redinger, who answered Debbie's call on Halloween 1998, said that the frustration was palpable, and concerns were raised by the searchers due to the possibility of Jake having a head injury, he didn't have a coat, and because the shortcut was marshy and contained 2 reservoirs and quicksand. So did Jake get swallowed up by this quicksand? Sergeant Redinger says he can't confirm Jake didn't fall into quicksand, but there was no evidence that anyone had been there lately. The searchers would have expected to find things like broken leaves or footprints before an area that might be boggy or quicksand, but they didn't see anything leading up to any of the bogs or quicksand, but they still couldn't rule it out. 3 years later, additional searches were done in that area, and again, nothing was found. Sergeant Redinger said, quote, "He was carrying a backpack and we've not recovered articles in that area. It's doubtful that a person who was struggling in quicksand would leave an article on. Kind of unlikely, not impossible, but kind of unlikely." So now what? That's always been the problem for investigators. Where could Jake have gone if he did indeed make it out of the woods? Sergeant Redinger said, quote, "The world becomes your oyster if you get outside the perimeter of that search area. Once your perimeter is gone, it becomes the world. I mean, he could be anywhere." Around 200 witnesses were interviewed to try and piece together Jake's disappearance, and among them were the 2 boys that he had previously fought with, but nothing indicated that they were involved. Even psychics have contacted Debbie over the years, and their theories were even considered. Redinger says police take the psychic's advice just like any other tip, but again, these leads turned up nothing. So Steve was the last person known to see Jake, and like I said, he came under intense scrutiny. He says in the Court TV documentary that it began with questioning, but soon turned into an intense interrogation accusing him of murdering Jake. He says he took a lie detector test, which he did pass, and said that he did it for Debbie, not the police, because he wanted her to know that he wasn't involved. And the police have actually listed Steve's account of what happened as the official version. The investigation is still ongoing, and several tips have been followed up on. Even so, investigators say they aren't any closer to solving the case than they were in 1998, as the case has a, quote, "an absolute lack of evidence." There are a few theories to what may have happened to Jake. The main theory is that Jake went missing because of a drunken accident. Because of his head injury and intoxication, it's possible he got lost and stumbled into a swamp. The investigation, though, hasn't found any evidence to support this claim. The investigation actually hasn't found any evidence to suggest that he was even in the wooded area. The second theory is that Jake was abducted after cutting through the woods. According to this theory, one rumor has it that he may have followed a hydro corridor which led him to an area near a strip club where he was abducted by, quote, "unsavory characters." But investigators have found no evidence or witnesses to suggest Jake was anywhere near the area on the night he disappeared. The police have stated that they lack a complete framework or central point to anchor their investigation, and the case manager of the investigation, Detective Inspector Bernie Murphy of the OPP, said that police considered 3 scenarios during the investigation. One being that Jake may have left Midland on his own. The second is that maybe Jake had an accident in the woods. And thirdly, Jake may have met with foul play. But according to Detective Bernie Murphy, quote, "Problem is, I look at the 3 and I don't see anything that supports any of them, but something happened to him, so we just keep them open." Jake's friends stayed off school to look for him, initially confident that he would be found, but as the days passed, the truth dawned. Jake was gone. Steve says that Jake would have called his mom if he was going to be away for any amount of time. So police had to look at the fact that Jake may have made it through the woods and someone on the other side hurt him. But despite doing everything possible to determine whether Jake was in that wooded area, police say that they have no indication that he was even there or that he made it out of the woods and then went somewhere else. Police do classify this as a missing persons case, but they cannot rule out foul play. Now, apparently cigarette butts were found in the woods and were supposed to be analyzed for DNA, but I couldn't find if they actually got any results. However, police say that the investigation will be decided by people, not science. They think it all depends on someone coming forward with some really good information. At the time of the Court TV documentary, which was 9 years after Jake disappeared, so in 2007, Steve Hayes says that he still lives under a cloud of suspicion. He says that he left the Midland area after Jake disappeared, but at the time of the documentary, he was back and had planned on staying. In memory of Jake, Jake's family planted a tree in the cemetery because they just felt they needed something to symbolize him. Now, I have to say that this is one of the most bizarre missing persons cases I have ever looked into. The rumor mill has gone wild with this case, adding to the mystery. I have seen more rumors about this case than any other case that I have looked into. Everything from Jake got lost in the woods, Jake fell into the marsh, somebody snatched him in the woods, he died after vomiting, he fell and hit his head on a tree root, killing him, he was attacked by someone or multiple people, he made it out of the woods only to be dragged somewhere else, he made it out of the woods and went to another party where he met with foul play, to mediums who have said that he made it out of the woods but was hit by a car, and that's just a few that I've read. And I understand, like I said, that rumors are rumors and they must be taken with a huge grain of salt, and I don't include half the rumors that I read. I try to stick to the facts as best as I can, but the problem with this case is that there is absolutely nothing to go on. Even police have publicly stated there is nothing to go on. So what happened to Jake? He allegedly disappeared from this trail, but police found nothing in or around it to suggest that he had even been there. Surely they would have been able to detect a scent or found some evidence if he had gone in there, but they didn't. So did he even go in there? Was there enough time for something to happen to him on the trail or just outside the trail on the street before his friend showed up? That seems most logical, but where did he go? And why was there no sign of him having been on the trail to begin with? It's so baffling. I try not to put my opinion in too much and stick to the facts as best I can, but here I have to say, in my opinion, this whole thing just doesn't make sense. Something is not adding up. Of course, I was not able to find much information from the RCMP regarding this case, and to that end, the RCMP have publicly stated that in this case they virtually have nothing. We all know, too, that police keep certain things close to their chests, so let's just hope that they have something in this case that isn't publicly known. I do believe that, like in any other case, someone knows something, and until they speak, we may never be able to fully piece together the events of that night, or what happened. Because there is no evidence, no DNA, no body, nothing. What do we know? Jake attended a house party and vanished. Sergeant Redinger told Simcoe.com in 2017 that the case was, quote, frustrating. There's nothing substantial we're working on now. We're not any closer than we were in 1998. After Jake made it out of the woods, where did he go? That has always been the problem for investigators. And police say that this is one of only 2 or 3 cases in Ontario with similar characteristics that have gone through this extensive of an investigation without any evidence at all. And that is pretty much where things stand today. So over the years since Jake has disappeared, Debbie's gotten calls from people claiming to know what happened, and every time she records them for police to follow up on, but again, nothing has ever come from them. Also, several mediums have called Debbie, one saying that Jake made it out of the woods only to be hit by a car and taken away by a panicked driver, but there's no evidence to support this either. Jake has been missing for far too long, without answers, without closure for his family. Like always, somebody knows something, and it is well past time that that person or persons come forward and tell what they know. As for Debbie, she said, quote, I have always felt that someone knows. When people do wrong, they are always worried about the punishment. I just want someone to let me know, even anonymously, where my son is and let our family move on. I am not taking it lightly when I say it doesn't matter to me if they are punished because they have lived with this too. That's got to be hard, but we just need closure. In 2018, Debbie reported that she had little contact with police because she only wants to hear from them if they have something significant to tell her. And as for the investigation, police reported in 2023 that there was nothing substantial that they were working on. In the words of Debbie Just, her greatest wish is to know what happened to her son before she dies. Quote, someday people aren't going to remember anymore. Then what? You have these moments of hope where you think, at last I'm going to know, even if it's awful. At least I'll know, because that's the hardest. I find myself being envious of people, even if something is awful, has happened to their child. At least they know. And you can deal with it. But I don't know if he's alive. I don't know if he died. How he died. So every day you're living with that, because no matter how old a person is, he's still my baby, he's still my son, and just bring him home. The Ontario government is offering a $50,000 reward for information leading to the arrest and conviction of the person or persons responsible for the disappearance and or death of Jake Just. At the time Jake disappeared, he was just 18 years old, and he was last seen wearing an olive green and beige colored long-sleeve shirt, black DVS running shoes, size 11, a black Jaguar backpack. He was 6 feet 2 inches tall and weighed 170 pounds. Jake has blonde hair, green or hazel eyes, and a 4-inch scar on the inside of his left bicep. Those with information regarding the case are asked to contact the Missing Persons and Unidentified Bodies/Remains Unit of the Ontario Provincial Police at 1-877-934-6363. Tips can also be submitted anonymously via Crime Stoppers at 1-800-222-8477. Thank you for taking the time to listen. So I've been working on trying to get this podcast more up to date and giving it more of a social media presence. So please do look it up on Facebook and Instagram as Unjust Crimes. I've also been working on creating a website, which is quite the work in progress, so keep tuned for updates on that. I've also been asked many times in the past how people can donate, which I have to say is pretty amazing that anyone would want to do that, so I've decided to add a PayPal link to my YouTube channel. You can find it on my channel's main page, and I just want to say to anyone that may want to donate, man, thank you so much. In the meantime, please do subscribe and give this video a thumbs up. And until next time, stay safe out there.